You may now take off your face mask if you'd like to do so. And as a reminder, we ask you to remain in your seat for the remainder of the service. And if you just absolutely have to get up, please put your face mask back on, fully cover your nose and mouth, and also give the people around you that might be within 6 feet of you, if you're passing them, to put their mask on. Also, we are making tremendous progress with this pandemic, but we're not quite out of the woods yet. So thank you so much for understanding, and I welcome everybody to church today. And I know we've got some people who haven't been around for a while, and I'm not sure if we have any first-time visitors, but if we do, let us know who you are, and we've got a gift for our first-time visitors. And I also just wanted to point out that on the top of page 5, we have our temporary worship guidelines for COVID-19, and I know those of you that have been coming for many weeks now probably have all of those memorized, but I say it every week just in case there's some new people that just need to familiarize yourselves with this. And they do change over time, but we haven't changed these in several weeks now. And the other change is that we are not passing around an offering plate during the pandemic. And so if you feel blessed enough to give a gift to the church, you can put your gift up here in the offering bowl afterwards. Or we also have a basket on the flower stand right by the front doors of the church. So let's see what we have for announcements today. One special request came in. We have some people that visit every year, and one of them needs a walker with a seat on it. And so he's able to walk, but he needs to be able to sit once he gets to where he needs to be. And I'm sure they can probably buy something for a month or so while they're here. But there are snowbirds that come every year, and sometimes they come during the winter, and sometimes they're more like sunbirds because they'll be here from, I think, the middle of June to the middle of July. And I see the Bartels over there saying, we've got one of those. So anyway, if you'll just see Penny's in touch with them, and we've got that taken care of. Wonderful. Okay, all the rest of the announcements are in the bulletin. Make sure you read all of them. We've got a lot going on, a lot coming up. Is coming up in this next week, and is going to last for a week, and then there's a church work day, and we can always use some extra hands for that. We've got outreach going on all the time, so even though there's a pandemic going on, we're still a very active church. And I did want to say that I was so proud of our church yesterday at the Kauai Pride Parade. We had about 20 of us at our float, and Doug was playing and singing most of the time, and Rose was dancing a whole bunch of the time, and the rest of us were waving little rainbow flags and doing all sorts of things to just shout out to people, aloha, we love you, you're perfect just the way you are. And I'll just tell you, it was quite an emotional time being out there with many of you. As I'm looking around the room today, many of you showed up, and just to be there knowing that we were making a difference in the lives of people, especially those that have been struggling during the pandemic, not being able to get the support they normally need, and many of them being in homes and they're not very welcomed in their homes. So we got a lot of positive feedback from people. And there were people saying stuff like, wow, that's a church. And I thought, wow, I long for the day when people will just say, and another church is accepting of me as I am and offers God's love to me, regardless of my sexuality or my color of skin or whatever. It's like God's love is for all of us. But anyway, I was just so thrilled yesterday. And then the Reverend Dr. David Popham, our conference minister, also flew in yesterday morning to Lihue, and he and his wife and some good friends drove through and saw us and took pictures of our float, and then I visited with them afterwards and had lunch together with them, and it was just a really special day to celebrate. And so again, thank you to the congregation for making that happen. And I know not everybody could be there, but your presence was felt as well as we shared God's love with people. I did want to say, and some of you will probably hear a little bit about this later, we didn't know exactly where we were going to be parked. I mean, I knew the block, but as we went to our designated space, there was a church behind us where they were not happy about Pride, I'll just say, and you can imagine. And they weren't very friendly to us, and I think they were praying for us, and so we prayed for them as well. And it was just really interesting listening to some of the comments that we could hear from people, just how happy they were that there was a church that was there affirming them. But anyway, it was just a really wonderful time. So thank you for who you are and for your support of everyone. Today's message, I forgot today's message, so I'll remember it, I promise, by the time I give it, but I just got so caught up in that. We do not lose heart. I knew that. So anyway, today we're going to really think about some of the things that we've heard on the news or experienced in our lives that have just been really discouraging, or that have even brought despair, frustration, anger, and reminding ourselves why, as followers of Jesus, we don't give up, we don't lose heart, we hold on to hope. And so as you think about maybe some of the things in your life recently where you felt that, I hope that you will just take a deep breath right now and remember that we do not lose heart because of God's love.
Come, let us worship God with confidence and faithfulness. For the steadfast love of the Lord lasts forever. Let our hearts rejoice in the gift of salvation, for the steadfast love of the Lord lasts forever. Let our eyes be open to wonder and mystery, for the steadfast love of the Lord lasts forever. Let our minds be open to God's grace and mercy, for the steadfast love of the Lord lasts forever. Let our sins be washed away and all guilt removed, for the steadfast love of the Lord lasts forever. Let us turn to God in times of trouble, for the steadfast love of the Lord lasts forever. Let us lift our prayers to God, for the steadfast love of the Lord lasts forever. Let us tune our hearts to hear the voice of God who answers us, for the steadfast love of the Lord lasts forever. Let us give thanks for the steadfast love of the Lord. Let us pray. O God, your steadfast love indeed lasts forever. We give you thanks for the times when we deeply feel your love. We thank you for your promises and the gift of faith during those times when we don't feel it. As we worship you today, may we be open to new ways in which to share your love. May we be attentive to those who feel far away from your love. May we share your love with everyone we encounter. Amen. Today's New Testament reading is from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 and 7 through chapter 5, verses 5. Listen to the word of God. Therefore, since it is by God's mercy that we are engaged in this ministry, we do not lose heart. But we have this treasure in clay jars so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies. For while we live, we are always being given up to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be made visible in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. But just as we have the same spirit of faith that is in accordance with Scripture, I believe, and so I spoke. We also believe, and so we speak, because we know that the one who raised the Lord Jesus will raise us also with Jesus, and will bring us with you into his presence. Yes, everything is for your sake, so that grace, as it extends to more and more people, may increase thanksgiving to the glory of God. So we do not lose heart. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight, momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all measure. Because we look not at what can be seen, but at what cannot be seen. For what can be seen is temporary, but what cannot be seen is eternal. For we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this tent we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling. If indeed, when we have taken it off, we will not be found naked. For while we are still in this tent, we groan under our burden, because we wish not to be unclothed, but to be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. He who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. Today's gospel reading is from Mark chapter 3, verses 20 to 35. Listen to the word of God, and it's Jesus in Beelzebub. The crowd came together again, so they could not even eat. When his family heard it, they went out to restrain him, for people were saying, "He has gone out of his mind." And the scribes came down from Jerusalem, said, "He has Beelzebub, and by the ruler of the demons he casts out the demons." And he called them to him and spoke to them in parables. How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand. By this end has come. But no one can enter the strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. Then, indeed, the house can be plundered. Truly, I tell you, people will be forgiven for their sins in whatever blasphemies they utter. But whoever blasphemies against the Holy Spirit can never have forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. For they have said, "He has an unclean spirit." Then his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent to him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside asking for you." And he replied to the crowd, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." May God bless the reading of the word, and may our hearts be open to receiving it.
A wonderful Savior is Jesus, my Lord. A wonderful Savior is He. He hideth my soul in the depths of the rock, where rivers of pleasure I see. He hideth my soul in the cleft of the rock that shadows a dry, thirsty land. He hideth my life in the depths of His love, and covers me there with His hand, and covers me there with His hand. A wonderful Savior is Jesus, my Lord. He taketh my burden away. He holdeth me up, and I shall not be moved. He giveth me strength as my day. He hideth my soul in the cleft of the rock that shadows a dry, thirsty land. He hideth my life and covers me there with his hand. When clothed in his brightness, transported I rise to meet him in clouds of the sky. He is perfect salvation, this wonderful love I'll shout with the millions on high. He hideth my soul in the cleft of the rock that shadows a dry, thirsty land. He hideth my life in the depths of his love and covers me there with his hand, and covers me there with his hand.
Thank you, Steve, for that beautiful song. "100 years ago, a black teenage boy walked into an elevator in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was already a white teenage girl in that same elevator, and for some reason, within moments, she began screaming, and the black teenage boy ran. The next day, the boy was arrested, and a group of angry white citizens of Tulsa showed up at the courthouse, and they demanded that the sheriff turn over the black boy to them, and the sheriff refused. Back in the black community, people had heard of a possible lynching of this man who they believed was innocent and hadn't even been given a fair trial, so they showed up at the courthouse to see if the sheriff needed support in protecting the boy who was a part of their community. The sheriff assured them that everything was under control. However, in the meantime, a group of angry white citizens tried to break into the National Guard armory to steal some rifles to take to the courthouse. And of course, news got back to the black community, and so about 75 African American men showed up at the courthouse, many of whom were armed, and they were met with about 1,500 white men, who many were also armed. Well, there was a bit of a skirmish, and those who were black left because they could see how outnumbered they were. The next day, we don't know how many people, for sure, but many of the white citizens of Tulsa entered the black community of Greenwood and started shooting and burning. We think there was as many as 300 of the black citizens, the residents of Greenwood, which was a predominantly African American neighborhood, as many as 300 died that day. But also, the entire business district was burnt to the ground. Schools were burned, the hospital was burned, libraries were burnt, almost every public building was burnt. And within 24 hours, virtually every black resident of that community was marched to an internment camp, actually 2 internment camps in Tulsa. Some were forced to stay there for over a week. When they were finally able to go home, over 1,000 of those homes were burnt, 1,250 or so. the entire downtown, once thriving business district was just gone. And there was no hospital to go to with all of the many injured citizens of that neighborhood. Because it's the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, we've been hearing about this on the news, and National Geographic had a cover story about it for the June edition. I'll just tell you that as I read about the events in National Geographic and also online and in various other sources, I was physically sickened. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized what had happened on that day 100 years ago. It was just awful. And during the past year or so, we've been hearing a lot more about racial tensions in our country. And many of you know that on my study leave this last fall, I got a hold of about 7 or 8 books on racism in America. And I've read all but, I think, 1 or 2 of them through cover to cover by now. And it has been one of the most disturbing period of reading that I've ever done. There is so much that I've thought, why did I not know about this? I grew up in this country, and there are things that have happened that I should have known about. Why am I just learning about these things now? Because I'm intentionally looking for them. Frankly, I didn't really know anything about the Tulsa Massacre until recently. And I really do think that is one of the major events in our country. Well, as sickened as I was, and as discouraged and angry and almost despairing as I was, I remembered the words of the Apostle Paul from today's reading of 2 Corinthians. We do not lose hope. And as I was reading about the massacre, I was so encouraged about some of the things that happened afterwards, where some of the white citizens of Tulsa that were also outraged about how the black people were treated, they showed up and offered their support. And the Red Cross showed up and provided assistance and support for months. And there were people who spoke against that horrible incident, and there continues to be. It's all that support and all that stepping out there, even though your family members might disagree with you politically or otherwise, saying this is wrong and I'm going to support these people because what you did to them, what our nation did to them was wrong. Organizations, churches, preachers, and others showed up and said, how can we help? And in a way, it restored a little bit my faith in humanity, because there's a part of me that still says, how can people even do that in the first place? But then to see so many other people say, that was wrong, how can we help you? How can we support you? Now, I know that we've got a long ways to go when it comes to race relations in this country. I think we're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg, actually. There's a lot more conversation that needs to happen, but those words from the Apostle Paul, we do not lose hope. We do not lose heart, that is. They touched me and they encouraged me this week. On November 27th, 1978, I had just returned to Santa Barbara, where I went to college, from a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend with my family on the San Francisco Peninsula. It was my freshman year, and it was my first time to go home and be with family for some kind of celebration after I was away at college. It was also my grandmother's 78th birthday. I remember hearing on that day, on November 27th, that Mayor George Moscone of San Francisco and Supervisor Harvey Milk were shot and killed in City Hall where they were at work. I couldn't believe it. I had just driven down from the San Francisco Peninsula, and I knew who these people were. I knew people that agreed with their politics, and I knew people that disagreed with their politics. But I was horrified that another supervisor that had just resigned broke a window in the basement of City Hall and snuck up with a gun and shot these two men who were in their 40s, young men with so much potential. Harvey Milk, as you probably know, was the first openly gay man to serve in public office in our country. The mayor, George Moscone, supported him and never said anything against LGBTQ folks. Dan White, the shooter, was a very religious person and believed that homosexuality was sinful. And so he shot not only the gay man, but the mayor who supported the gay man. I don't think I was old enough to vote in that election. I turned 18 that month, and I do remember thinking, in 4 years, I'm going to vote. I don't know how much of a difference one person can make, but I am definitely voting in the next election because I can. But as I was thinking this week about what happened on November 27th, 1978, I was actually watching the movie Milk, about the life of Harvey Milk, how he grew to prominence in San Francisco politics in the 1970s, and what had happened during that time. And as many of you will remember, Anita Bryant, the singer and beauty queen, was traveling across the country trying to pass legislation or helping state governments and local governments pass legislation against gay people. She believed that gay people were sinful. She believed that God and Jesus were on her side. She also believed in the Briggs Initiative, which in California at the time, if it passed, would have said that any person who is even suspected of being gay can be immediately fired if they work in a school. Anita Bryant believed that the only reason a gay person would work in a school would be to change all the poor little straight people into gay people, into gay children, and that had to be stopped. Well, it was because of people like Harvey Milk who relentlessly advocated against the Briggs Initiative that actually kept it from passing. I'd kind of forgotten a lot over the last 40 or so years, but at the beginning of 1978, the vast majority of Californians were actually in favor of the Briggs Initiative. And if the voting had taken place earlier in 1978, if you were even suspected of being gay, you could lose your job. If you were a teacher, an administrator, a cook, a custodian. The Briggs Initiative not only said that you could be fired, it also said that if you are a person, even a straight person, who supports and speaks openly in favor of gay rights, you can be fired too. As I was watching the movie Milk this week and all this was coming back to me, again, I felt that anger, that sense of despair, that feeling of almost being physically ill again. And of course, I remember those words from the Apostle Paul, "We do not lose heart." And I was thinking it was because of people like Harvey Milk that relentlessly campaigned against the Briggs Initiative that in November of 1978, the citizens of California voted against it, and the Briggs Initiative failed. And I found a glimmer of hope that turned into a flame, not only because of that, but because after the death of George Moscone and Harvey Milk, Dianne Feinstein publicly came out in support of Harvey Milk and the initiative, against the initiative. Governor Jerry Brown, the same thing. President Carter, the same thing. It took one person to say, this is wrong. We cannot let this happen in our country. And pretty soon, it was like the stars all lined up at the right time in the right way. And in less than a year, the culture in California changed from people totally willing, the vast majority of people totally willing to vote yes on the Briggs Initiative, to the majority of people in November voting against it. We do not lose heart. As angry as I got as I was watching the movie Milk all over again, I just remember thinking, wow, how much has changed since the 1970s to today for LGBTQ people. That we as a church can be in a pride parade, and that our mayor can be the first person that goes down the parade, and another, or at least one, if not more, Kauai County supervisors or council persons going through the parade and clapping and waving their rainbow signs and saying, right on. What a huge difference has been made since the 1970s. We have a long ways to go. Just like with racial issues, there's still a lot of churches out there that tell their young people every single week that they are sinful, that they are bad, that God can't stand who they are. And there's a lot of politicians out there that frankly still believe what people believed back in the 70s, trying to pass the Briggs Initiative. And there's a lot of other celebrities out there like Anita Bryant that are still doing the same thing and always saying, God's on our side. Jesus is on our side. We do not lose heart. Just 5 years ago this week, we heard the tragic news of Pulse, a place we'd never heard of before, a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida, where a man walks in with a semi-automatic rifle and a semi-automatic pistol and opens fire and shoots 100 people in this gay nightclub. The worst violence against LGBTQ people in our nation's history. And until the 2017 shooting in Las Vegas, the most people who died in the shooting by a single person in our nation's history in a mass shooting. Again, all this stuff comes back when we not celebrate, but remember these anniversaries. And as I listened to the news this week and remembered how it felt 5 years ago, I was just angered and feeling that despair once again. But thank God for those words of the Apostle Paul that I could hold on to. We do not lose heart. So the Apostle Paul said those words. And today we still hold on to them because we need those words. Some 50 people died in Pulse. About the same amount, 50 were injured. The man who shot them claimed that he was doing it for religious reasons and God was on his side. He happened to be Muslim. But where I found hope, again, was what happened afterwards, where the community came together, when our nation came together, when President Obama and Joe Biden, the vice president at the time, actually flew to Florida to be supportive of the families, to visit with them, and to publicly state that our nation would do whatever it could to support those families and to investigate what actually happened and why it happened and do our very best as a country to keep that from ever happening again. As tragic as that was, I was just amazed that the Islamic community in this country, the leaders in mosques, encouraged, not only denounced firmly what happened, but encouraged their people to actually break Ramadan and eat some food so they could donate blood for their families. We do not lose heart. This week I read through the entire book of 2 Corinthians just to get a feel for what Paul was going through as he said those words, as he wrote them down, as he was writing to the church in Corinth, actually saying to them, we do not lose heart. And I was actually blown away at the pain and probably the anger and disappointment, the suffering and the persecution that Paul underwent simply for being a Christian in the second half of the first century. And I wrote down some of the things this week that just a few days ago that I'd like to read to you. And these are just some things that Paul actually wrote to the Corinthians saying, man, it's tough. I get it. I know you're going through a hard time. So am I, and so are my traveling companions. He wrote that his affliction and the affliction of those who accompany him on his journey, that they were afflicted. He writes that his suffering was abundant. In Asia, he and his companions, he says, were utterly, unbearably crushed. They despaired life itself. They felt as if they had received the sentence of death. They were in deadly peril. They had anguish of heart, and none of these words are an exaggeration by any stretch. They were on the verge of being killed daily, simply for traveling around this large swath of the Roman Empire, saying, God loves everyone, just as they are. For some reason, they were a threat to the Roman Empire. In fact, eventually Paul was imprisoned and killed in Rome for that message. But the reason he could write, we do not lose heart, is because he didn't focus just on the affliction, just on the suffering. In fact, the list of those other things is quite large, but I wrote down some of those as well, just to give you an idea of what kept Paul going. So he wrote about grace and peace and mercy and consolation and hope and blessings that come through prayer and gratitude and joy and abundant love and life and freedom and glory, and actually sing the glory of the Lord with unveiled faces. And being transformed into the image of God. No wonder chapter 4 begins with those words, we do not lose heart. Paul was able to see the bigger picture. And I just want to tell you that when I have suffered in this life, I haven't even come close to what the Apostle Paul suffered. But I do get it, that we do not lose heart as bad as it gets. Paul went on to say that we carry a treasure, actually, in jars of clay. And the clay jar that he is referring to is your body, my body, each of you, each of your bodies. And as we all know, our bodies, like a clay jar, sometimes crack and chip and leak and break. But Paul says we carry a treasure in these bodies. And that treasure is God's love. For me, for you, for the apostle himself, for each person that you're going to encounter today, and for every person in this world whom you will never meet. This is the treasure that we carry with us. And according to Paul, it is priceless. It is the greatest treasure in the world. And sometimes we feel it so much it just pours out of the top, and sometimes it leaks through the cracks and gets through the chips or whatever. But the idea is, if you, as a follower of Jesus, will take Jesus seriously and fill yourself with all that love, that's what you give to the world, this treasure of God's love. No matter what's happening to your body, no matter how much it cracks or breaks or whatever, you always have God's love. God always loves you, no matter what you're going through. No matter what crazy, selfish, stupid things people do in our country and around us, and sometimes even us, God's love is right there as this treasure that is more special than any other treasure we can imagine, any other treasure we'll ever have. I'm sure all of you, like me, have listened to or watched the news, and you have felt that discouragement, that anger. Some of the stuff has been from 100 years ago, or several decades ago, a few years ago, or yesterday. But I hope you too will go back to the words that Doug read for us today from 2 Corinthians, and that you will be reminded as you hear this news that we are these imperfect clay pots, our bodies, who carry this incredible treasure of God's love that is more powerful than all the hatred in the world. And that's what we offer. And in every story that discourages us, I know the news doesn't always show it, but there are people who show up because of God's love. And they show up and they support, they show up and they feed, they show up and they heal, and they show up and say, we love you, what do you need? Be that clay pot that's full of love. And remind yourselves, anytime you turn on the news or hear anything discouraging, those words of the Apostle Paul, we do not lose heart. Thank you. And it's now time for the sharing of joys and concerns, and I think we have some cards coming up. Thank you, Rosemary. And as a reminder, we do have prayer requests on page 7 that we continue to pray for during the week. And this one is from Steve, who has, it looks like, I hope it's a joy. I would like to thank Norma for 50 wonderful years of marriage. This week is their 50th anniversary. And he goes on to say, she is my strength and rock, and I thank God for such a great blessing. So congratulations to the two of you. And we celebrate your love and know that there's only been moments of joy and unwedded bliss for 50 years. And then Debbie Gunning says, joy that Sean and Tiffany's offer on a condo in Kalaheo has been accepted. So wonderful. So that's Debbie's son, Sean, and Tiffany. And then condolences to the Honda family. Brenda passed away last Sunday. She was an outstanding teacher. So prayers for the family of Brenda. And then Tiffany says, congratulations to Ezra for his first try at pitching in baseball and walked 2 people and struck out 3 in a single inning. And I know Ezra's over here in Sunday school, and he was keeping me company this morning as I was getting ready for church. So wonderful. Let us pray together. I invite you just to take a moment and take a deep breath and feel God's loving presence just fill you. And after a moment, I'll lead us in prayer. Holy God, we give you thanks for the joys that we carry in our hearts today, celebrations of anniversaries and birthdays and good job at baseball and a wonderful pride parade. We have indeed so much for which to give thanks, and so as we do so, God, we acknowledge your love and your grace, your mercy that is constant. And in this world where we often get discouraged and where we do see hatred and we see racism and sexism and all sorts of other isms, oh God, we thank you for those other people who show up and say, that was wrong. How can we support you? What kind of healing do you need? What kind of food do you need? What else do you need? And we thank you, God, that because of your strong love and the light of Christ within us, we are able to be the presence of Christ in the world today, even during times that are so discouraging. God, we also ask for your healing comfort for those who are ill and injured. We pray for those who have recently lost loved ones, like the Honda family. We pray for their peace and for good memories and for comfort. And God, for this nation which is so divided in so many ways, we pray, oh God, that your love would continue to bring us together, and that we would say no to division and yes to healing. Give us wisdom, give us compassion, and we pray the same for our leaders at every level, local, state, federal, and for people of nations throughout the world. Thank you, God, that your presence is indeed felt, that it is real, and that your love sustains us, and that we can always say, we do not lose heart. Amen.
What a fellowship, what a What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how sweet to walk in this pilgrim way, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how bright the path grows from day to day, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so near, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms.
Thank you, Steve, and what a wonderful reminder to lean on the everlasting loving arms of God. And now I invite you to put your face mask back on. Make sure it's fully covering your nose and your mouth. And also be sure to keep it on until you're either off the property or back in your vehicle. And now I invite you to stand for the benediction. May the love of God, the grace of our Savior Jesus Christ, and the comfort and fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us and with all people now and forever. Amen. Go in peace.